This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome to the Xcast X-Files Podwatch, episode 95, covering 4D and Lord of the Flies. I'm your host, Darren Mooney, and with me is TV editor and writer at the Digital Fix, novelist and screenwriter Baz Greenland. How are you, Baz?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Glad to hear you. It's been a bit of a while since we talked last, when we were talking about like Dead Alive and 3 Words. Now we're
back in season 8,
back in season 8. So now we're getting to the part of the X-Files that everybody really, really loves to talk about, the 9th season.
Yeah. Do you know what? I actually think, though, we're talking about some of the better episodes of season 9, so it's probably not too bad. So,
I like the way you phrase it as if it's Russian roulette.
I kind of think season 9 has it's not all dire. I think that's probably when it tries to be Doggett and Reyes on the X-Files, it's actually not half bad. It's just, I mean, guess what? Season 9, the trouble with season 9 is that they couldn't give up the ghost of Mulder. They made it all about Mulder, even though he was never coming back. And then, of course, they shoehorned Scully. Poor Gillian Anderson, but basically had to phone it down in the performance. She's an Emmy Award-winning actress, and they gave her absolutely nothing to do apart from go, my baby, for so many episodes, and then she gives up the baby. So there are a lot of frustrations I have with season 9, but when it tried to be kind of the X-Files, the Next Generation, I don't think it was half bad, and there's some fairly decent stuff in there.
Which I think is a nice sort of segue into talking about the first 4 episodes, because I think if you're talking about the X-Files being the next generation with a capital X, I think that 4D is a pretty good example, because it's an episode that focuses on Doggett and Reyes, and it's an episode in which treats Scully as a member of the supporting cast, because I think that when it brought her back in, obviously the 2-parter that opened the season was very Mulder heavy, to the point of having like Mulder's stunt butt appearing before any of the credited regulars, and then Demonicus was very much like, well, what do we do with Scully now? 4D, I think, is the first time that the series actually sort of says, well, what would the X-Files be like if it were actually about Doggett and Reyes? And I think that it works really well because it allows Reyes to be out there. It allows, this is the first episode, I think, where you've really got a handle on who Reyes is as a character. Because I think that in Demonicus, it tried to set up this idea of her being like a demonologist or whatever, but then it went down this sort of rabbit hole of, oh my god, well, Scully's still around, we got to write her in somehow. I think that having her solve a mystery involving Doggett, and I think having her sort of engage with this sort of paranormal idea and this sort of idea of parallel universes in a way that's really out there, and just having her go for it in a way that, I think Doggett says himself, the plot to this episode is very Star Trek. But I like that she just grabs it and goes for it.
I think that's it. It's the first time you get to see them. Ironically, because he's actually in a hospital bed the entire time, there's still this kind of really interesting rapport between them. And I do think they shoehorn could they be a romantic couple far too early. There's a little bit of chemistry there, but the whole what tenderly wiping his mouth as he brings hot dogs to her housewarming thing it's a bit too on the nose, I think, at this stage. But at the same time, they've got a good rapport, and it's nice to see them kind of almost working together and her really taking the lead. I think actually it's the problem of the episode. I hate to say this, is Scully. They have to kind of fall, and they have just so many episodes of season 9. They just kind of force her in. If she wasn't in the episode, it would still be a good episode.
And I think that, to be fair to 4D, I think it does a good job of putting her on the sidelines, letting her play basically Mama Scully to the Next Generation, where she has that little scene where she talks about, sort of her experiences in hospital and sort of Mulder's experience in hospital and her experience with seeing her dad visit her and Beyond the Sea. So there's this sort of mentor thing that I think is better than a lot of the stuff involving Scully. But I mean, we're going to talk about stuff involving Scully and probably in the later episodes that we're covering.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. I do like that the mentor scene is the one bit that kind of redeems him and I think making Scully the mentor is probably the best way they can go. I think it's nice. It's not just about her and William and Mulder, so it's good.
It is, and I mean, because that's the thing. Season 8 gave you such a nice ending to her story that it's like there's no need to give her a new story, and particularly when the writers clearly have no idea what they're doing with her, because they're like, well, David Duchovny's gone, but we want Mulder to be a part of it, so let's make Scully a proxy for him, and that doesn't work at all because it reduces her agency completely. As you said, she's an Emmy-nominated actress who's given absolute pap to work with. I think that like using her in this way, while it doesn't make the best use of Gillian Anderson, it makes reasonable use of Scully in the context of the X-Files, of having to do the X-Files with Scully sort of on as an appendix. But here's the thing, like, one of the things that struck me watching the ninth season, it's funny you should say, like, the Doggett and Reyes episodes are really good, and I think they generally are. Like, I think they're much stronger than the episodes that are like, oh my god, is Mulder going to show up? When Mulder isn't around, everybody should be talking about Mulder. Mulder should be, like, 20% more prophesized Messiah, if we could work that in somehow. I think that, like, the thing about, like, the Doggett and Reyes episodes is they give a sense of, like, how the X-Files could be going forward. And, like, one of the things about the ninth season episodes focused on Doggett and Reyes is the sense that they sort of hint a little bit at where genre television is going. Because I think one of the things about 4D that's striking, watching it now from, like, the context of, like, 2017, is the idea that it plays very much like a Fringe episode, almost as much as an X-Files episode.
Yeah. I mean, it's my one slight bugbear with some of the Doggett and Reyes episodes is that they made the X-Files events happen to them rather than they investigate the X-Files. There's probably not enough of them going off across the US and finding something which is X-Filey. But it definitely works. And I kind of surprising. It's surprising, really, it took this long for them to do this kind of parallel universe type storyline as well. Because it's a classic sci-fi idea. They've done it back in Star Trek all the way back into the 60s with the Mirror Universe. So the fact that it took X-Files 9 years to do it is quite surprising.
It is, but I mean, one of the things that's interesting about, like, the ninth season as a whole is that there's this recurring theme of, like, fractured realities in it. So, like, obviously this is the first example, but then later on you get, like, the Kid and Scary Monsters, you get this sort of Brady Bunch house, you get this sort of encroaching sense of, like, reality is sort of folding in and breaking. And I wonder, like, part of me is sort of, like, watching this thinking, one of the things about the ninth season, it was the first season after 9/11, and there's this great argument that, like, when 9/11 happened, sort of the popular consciousness sort of fractured and psyched, and it's the moment at which sort of we lost any tether to, like, a collective shared reality, which obviously leads to stuff now where you've got, like, social media bubbles and stuff like that. But one of the things I like about the ninth season is it sort of seems to gesture at that. Like, there's, like, Audrey Pauley, for example, is another example of this, where there's, like, a little dollhouse that's a pocket reality. But, like, there's this recurring sense that, like, Doggett and Reyes are, you know, sort of almost exploring these sort of branching alternate worlds where there's sort of little pockets, sort of brackets within themselves. And I mean, I like that, because you point out that they don't do much sort of the conventional X-Files, go to a strange town, investigate a strange case sort of stories. I wonder if, like, this was released in 2001, and this was sort of like, this was after the internet had been everywhere. I wonder if there's a sense that, like, the X-Files as it existed in the 90s, you know, the American sort of byroads and highways and all that sort of stuff, if that was no longer sort of something that people believed existed, because, you know, you had the information superhighway that could take you everywhere, you had, like, Google Maps emerging, you had, like, this wealth of information that was all properly documented, that you couldn't really have this sort of, like, mystical area in the middle of the continent. I think that, like, I wonder if that's sort of why the ninth season is focused in the way that it is, sort of it drifting away from that sort of mystical heartland stuff.
Possibly.
It also starts the trend, and it's an unfortunate trend that I don't know if we probably won't be talking about it, but I suspect other later podcast hosts will be talking about it, of incapacitating Doggett and or Reyes over the course of an episode.
That happens a lot, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. They spend more time in hospital in season 9 than I think Mulder and Scully did for the first 5 seasons of the show, and Scully had cancer.
Exactly. Yeah, no, they're quite hard. I think poor Doggett particularly. I mean, this is the one thing, and again, we'll probably talk about in other episodes as well. So I know we're going to talk about 4 season 9 episodes in total, but it seems like they start to undermine everything about Doggett. Doggett was such a breath of fresh air. There's really no nonsense character with such integrity, and then in season 9 they make him this kind of he's basically off on his own, accusing the highest levels of the FBI of conspiracy. And then he suddenly got his fractious relationship with Scully that came out of nowhere. And then they constantly injure and shoot and hospitalise him. And they really do put him through his paces. And it's not particularly, I don't know if it's because it's a subconscious thing of, like, but Mulder's a hero, not Doggett, really. So you can do it once, Doggett, because in any other show, if you constantly do this to the hero, the audience wouldn't stand for it. You know, why put the hero through so much misery? Because he's kind of the secondary hero, they kind of just get away and do what they want, really. And it is a bit of a shame that they do lessen, even though Doggett finally gets to be off, almost supposedly doing his own show. they actually lessen him.
They totally do. I mean, like, this is like one of the better examples of putting Doggett in hospital, because he actually gets to have a character arc where he wants to commit suicide. He wants Reyes to kill him. Like, when you compare that to stuff like Providence and Provenance, where it's basically a way to get him off screen for a while, or even like The Truth, where he's basically a glorified chauffeur.
Oh, don't get me started on The Truth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably good you're not talking about that one, because I'm so many into that episode.
That would go for a while. Otherwise, just sort of wrapping this up, one of the things I don't like about it is that the Lucas character, and it's something that happens a lot in the 9th season, the baddies are very, very crudely drawn. Like, I miss the days where you could have, like, a Robert Modell character, or even a Donnie Faster in the 2nd season. The bad guy here is basically a mama's boy, to the point where Skinner actually calls him mama's boy. He's a really creepy dude who lives with his mother and sleeps with his mother and becomes a serial killer. And there's nothing else to him.
No, I mean, I don't know. I think the actor doesn't do a bad job. Dylan Haggerty, he does quite a good job of making him quite a creepy character, but that's all he is. He is just a creepy killer. Even so, I think he's still memorable enough for me that he's a creepy enough villain to kind of be the bad guy of the episode and actually work as a bad guy of the episode, I think.
He's very much like Psycho, Norman Bates, like version 456, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But you're right, I think really this is for me, the best thing about this episode is that it gives Annabeth Gish a chance to be on her own and demonstrate that she can be a good lead character. And I think she was never given enough. I mean, Robert Patrick did get some really good stuff to do. I don't think she ever got as far in the show to get some really meaty stuff, but this was the start of it, I think, really.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, like, Gish was also somewhat undermined by My Struggle too, but we're not going to talk about that because that'll open up a whole kettle of fish.
I say worse than The Truth, but anyway, that's another time.
Alright, well, with that in mind, then we'll sort of segue neatly into talking about our second episode, Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies, Baz. How do we feel about that?
Well, it's an interesting one, because when I revisited a lot of key episodes for Digital Fix, I actually bypassed this one. I covered about 15 episodes from each season to get all the classics and all the big mythology ones. And I'm kind of ashamed I did, because I really actually quite enjoyed it. It's not brilliant by any means. There's a lot of issues with it. But it's actually quite a lot of fun too. I really had a good time watching this episode for the Podwatch.
And what did you like about it? What sort of jumped out about you? What grabbed you about it?
There was something fun about it, and it was I think probably the first time season 9 and this new look X-Files tried to have kind of slightly comedy-esque, particularly with Dr. Rocky Bronzino, who what he didn't do is go far enough. They should have made it more of a comedy episode. I think he's supposed to be like a male version of Dr. Bambi, but it doesn't quite get that far. But I do it's very cringeworthy, but it's kind of fun, his relationship with Scully. And I think he does give Scully something to do this episode. It's one of the rare season 9 episodes that isn't about her and William and Mulder, when she's kind of having a bit of fun as well. And it's great to see her with this kind of new partner.
Oh, there is, where Rocky is, where she's like, I'm a mother, Rocky, and he's like, mothers are people too. I love Michael Wiseman's smile. I don't know if there's any makeup accentuating it or any sort of like design or emphasis or lighting in the way that they do it, but he just looks so sleazy. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah, if he's not, I think they should have gone further on this. I think that if they made this a comedy episode, I think he would probably be a more memorable character even. It kind of borders, he does a good job, and it's kind of fun. And there's a sleazy thing going on with Scully essentially trying to fend him off.
Much like The Flies, which I think is a nice touch.
Yeah, and I just like episodes like the cockroach episode where I can never pronounce the title of the episode back from season 3. But
War of the Copra somethings.
Something like that, yeah. I love that episode too. I kind of like creepy crawlies, and I think it's quite fun with The Flies. There's a couple of gruesome moments, particularly at the end of the discovery of the dad in the kind of cocoon at the end, and
or the kissing. The kissing scene really weirds me out because that's such a. I don't know if it's because it's such a basic fear. It's like, you put your tongue in somebody and it turns out that it gets bitten off. But it really unnerving in a way that like it's very easy to do from a practical perspective. But it makes you wonder what the hell is going on kind of inside inside Dylan sort of Loken's guard, you know?
Yeah, it's almost got that kind of thing that Buffy did extremely well, and this fortunately doesn't, of that kind of create monsters out of real humans. This is basically puberty. It's all about puberty, and I can imagine Buffy's taking this episode would have been amazing, but I think this one it dips in there a bit with the kind of the idea of the first kiss, and it's horrible, and the abandonment of the father and so on. But it's not. It's a fun episode. It's by no means one of the strongest episodes of season 9. It's kind of that middling. It's not terrible, and there really are some stinkers in season 9.
About to say, I like that that's sort of the qualified praise. The best episodes of season 9 are maybe not the best episodes of the X-Files, but this is most definitely not a best episode of season 9. But it's also not the worst episode.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess it really it's probably what lets it down. Really, it's the performances. Like Jane Lynch, I think. As a mother, maybe I just have memories of Sue Sylvester when everyone used to watch Glee at the beginning, but she was so great in that, and this was just a very kind of slightly dull performance from her. And Samara Armstrong as Natalie the girl is just kind of a bit bland. It's just there's nothing. It's trying to be a lot more. There's a potential for this to be a really good memorable episode, and it just kind of never really rises enough to deliver on that scale. It never becomes a comedy episode. It never quite becomes a horror episode. It kind of sits somewhere in the middle, kind of very middling.
It is. I mean, because it's an episode that was written by Thomas Schnauz. It's his first script for the X-Files. I think he also wrote Scary Monsters later in the year. He was one of the writers. I think he was roommates with Vince Gilligan in college, and he was one of the writers who worked on The Lone Gunman. So I think that's why you get the sort of comedy sensibility of it. And actually, one of the things I like about late season X-Files, which is, probably accounts a bit for the variable quality, is the fact that Carter sort of almost rehomed like production team members from his failed shows. Like the one that we were talking about there, 4D, that was written by Stephen Madia, who had started out writing Harsh Realm, which was cancelled, and then sort of Carter ported him over, which I thought was very decent of him. Whatever you can say about Carter, he tended to take care of people who worked for him. And I think that Schnauz went on to be, like, he wrote for Breaking Bad, and I think he also writes on Better Call Saul, so he's a great writer, but I think that he struggled with, like, the tone of the X-Files as a show, and I think that, like, he's a great comedy writer, because I think his 2 scripts for The Lone Gunman, which are, what are they now? They are Madam I Madam and Los Tengo de los Pisteros. Yes, that is exactly how that is pronounced. But they're actually really good episodes. This, yeah, you're right. I think it sort of feels very tone deaf, and it feels like it's not sure if it wants to be funny or scary. Because flies are, like you say, you like creepy crawlies. Flies are incredibly icky. And, like, there's something very, like, primal, and there's almost biblical about the idea of, like, flies swarming round, or sort of, like, a literal plague of insects consuming. But, I mean, I think it also suffers from a problem, and it's a recurring problem with X-Files episodes that focus on teenagers. And I think, like, particularly of the infamous tree episode from season 5 is probably the best example. What's that? Schizogyny, I think that one is. But this one also has that sort of, like, there's a sense that it's written by somebody who has never actually encountered a teenager in their lives.
Quite possibly.
Because it's like, okay, well, Dylan is like, he's a teenager, he's an outcast, so what does he do? He listens to Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd. What's the easiest outcast band that we could think of for a kid to listen to that we would have listened to ourselves? Let's go with Syd Barrett, that'll work. But I mean, even stuff like the dumbass elements of it.
Yeah, it's quite dated. And it's just, it's quite. You basically just want all the kids to die. It's one of those things when, okay, just go and kill all of them now, because none of them are particularly likable. The only one, Dylan is slight. Hank Harris does a good job of making Dylan a little bit likable. You kind of feel a bit sorry for him, particularly when you find out his mum is this fly woman. Not that Twitch is that as good as it could have been, but people like Ammon Paul, particularly, who obviously went on to Breaking Bad, here it's just a bit one note, really. It's something interesting about it.
He's like pint-sized Johnny Knoxville is basically what he is. There's a real sense of, like, get these kids off my lawn sort of feeling to it. Like, there's a sense that, like, the X-Files is 9 years old now, and it's turned into a really grumpy old man. And it happens across the 90s as well. Like, Scary Monsters got into a lot of trouble when it aired because it was seen as, like, a take that directed at fans. And I think that Sunshine Days still has that reputation with a certain strain of fandom, where they take it as, like, you kids go outside now and turn off off the televisions, it's only a TV show, sort of patronising attitude. And I think that there is a sense of that with, say, the handling of Dumbass, which is obviously meant to be jackass, where it's like, kids these days with their rock and roll and their hip-hop and their TV shows. It just feels so trite and sort of patronising, and like, it feels like a 40-year-old guy trying to be cool and sort of not succeeding at all.
But it's all right. It's not bad.
By the standards of the 9th season, this will seem like a classic by the end of the year. All right then, Baz, where can we find you online?
I am Twitter at Baz Greenland, and you can follow me at The Digital Fix as well.
Perfect. I'm Darren Mooney, so I'm at Darren_Mooney. I also host a podcast, The 250, at The 250. It's also on the Black Hole Media Podbean as well. All right then, with that in mind then, you can also follow the Xcast at the X_cast. You can find us on Facebook. There's a Facebook group which is called the Xcast X-Files Podcast Fan Group. If you just Google us, you'll find us there. Myself and Baz will actually, you're in for a treat, because myself and Baz are going to be back tomorrow to talk about Trust No One and John Doe. I think one of those episodes is very good. I think one of those episodes is very bad. We'll find out which tomorrow. Until next time, trust no one.